Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today I have Euler Broplet on the line, and this episode is part of our iConnections New York Global Alt Series, where we bring you the best of those that attended and participated in the Global Alts in New York City. And Euler he's the founder and managing partner over at Vested World. Euler, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
All right, so I love this topic. We're going to talk about the theory on economic development and how it applies to Africa. I love talking about Africa and development there and to get into the weeds on that, so this will be a fun episode. But before we get into that piece of it, I do want to get into iConnections a bit. So maybe give you a little bit more about the backstory of how you got connected and your experience at the event.
Yeah, this was our second iConnections event. The first one was earlier this year in Miami, and it was definitely, you need to learn about how to fully utilize the iConnections platform. There are obviously a number of allocators there, more than you could ever even hope to meet with. And so it's just a process of targeting the right ones with the right outreach and trying to get meetings. And we were happy with the meetings that we got at this session, this Global Alts New York. So looking forward to future events.
All right, so you got to admit, on the Miami one, we're recording this June 30th. I think it's over 100, and it feels like 200 in Miami. Good timing when they had it, right? Because you ain't getting me to Miami right now.
Yeah, no, now's not the time to be in Miami.
Yeah, I was like, oh, poor.
It's not the time to be in Chicago either this week. But
yeah,
I like it.
I'm going to tell you, I had a little bit of a chill yesterday. It was like 69 degrees, and I'm in LA, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a little chilly. And I have friends telling me from other areas, and they're like, Adam, you better stop. Humans are never happy. I'm like, God, can you turn the thermostat up 3 degrees? I'd really prefer a 72 if you don't mind. So first off, I love that iConnections went well for you, and the fact that you said this, I don't want to glance over this. You said there's too many that you could possibly meet. Talk a little bit about, now that you're a little bit more experienced after the first event, how the app and all that stuff worked for you. And I just mean more from a standpoint of you're matching up and you're meeting with the right people. You're not just doing busy work.
Yeah, I think the fact that allocators go through and they put specifically what they're looking for, what they don't want.
Yeah.
It's really helpful in terms of targeting your outreach to the people that it's gonna hit well with and that are most likely to respond. And so it took us time to learn that, and I think we're still learning about who should we reach out to, how should we do it, when should we do it, how should we follow up. And so, but just the fact that the platform gives you a lot of information about what allocators are looking for, what they're seeing from other funds that are on the platform, and what you can do to distinguish yourself. That all, it's like having an investor relations person in-house that can help you with a lot of that work and helping you build those relationships with some of the people that hopefully will invest in your fund at some point down the road. So yeah, I think it's a valuable platform that we will continue to leverage.
Amazing. Let's switch it up a bit. So before we go further, tell us a little bit about Vested World.
So Vested World is a fund manager that invests in early stage companies in a few countries across Africa. So the primary countries we focus on are Ghana, Nigeria, and Kenya. And then there are a handful of secondary countries that we will invest in. We don't invest in every country on the continent. We want to focus on the ones that we feel like we know the best and have strong relationships and can source deals effectively and evaluate them and manage those investments once we make them. And then from a sector standpoint, we're focusing, unlike traditional venture capital, we focus on some basic industries, so agribusinesses and consumer products and services. And then we also look at how we can leverage technology, how companies across these markets can leverage technology to be more efficient, scale faster, and in certain instances, leapfrog the traditional ways of doing things. You don't have to rely on old technology. You can really supercharge your growth by leveraging these solutions. And what I tell people all the time is, look, we're taking a lot of risk investing at the stage that we're investing at in the markets where we're investing, but we really shouldn't be taking technology risk. We shouldn't be taking product market fit risk. We shouldn't be taking business model risk. And those are all things that we believe firmly that if you take those risks, it's unnecessary risk for these markets. We don't need to do that. A lot of these solutions have been developed and are being utilized elsewhere. How can we apply them to solve, market-specific problems in the countries where we are?
Obviously, a lot of different ways to come on a niche or a thesis. How did you settle on focusing on Africa first? Like, let's maybe start there before we go deeper.
Yeah. That was the easiest one. I'm from Liberia. Mm-hmm. I was fortunate enough to leave the country during the Civil War in the early 90s. But immediately upon leaving, I was like, how do I go back and contribute towards development in Africa? And that was kind of my North Star throughout, childhood, into college, into law school, into the early part of my career. It was always, how do I get back to contributing towards development in Africa? Initially, I thought it would be through politics. But after interning for both Republican,
I don't know where you're going with that one. You were getting good. Go ahead. Continue.
I was like, this isn't for me. It's no matter what you do, 50% of people are going to disagree with you, and you're never going to make everyone happy. And I'm a consensus-driven person, and so I kept looking around, and I had the fortune of spending time in living and working in Hong Kong and traveling around Asia, and really started to understand what happened between the 1950s and current day, and why parts of Asia and Africa diverged so much from an economic development standpoint. And it really led me to the realization that building businesses that have the potential to scale and employ people and pay those people well, but also contribute towards economic development, is the most important thing I could do to contribute towards development in Africa. And so that's what led me to starting this. At the time, microfinance was at the height of popularity, and there were a number of organizations all around, but most of those organizations were lending $5, $10, maybe up to $50,000 to micro businesses and charging really high interest rates that prevented those businesses from really scaling in a meaningful way. And then Carlyle, was raising an $800 million Africa-focused fund. There were a few funds that had or were circling around $1 billion focused on buyout opportunities. And at that time, McKinsey came out with a study that said across all 54 countries in Africa, there were only 400 that made more than $1 billion a year, and only 700 that made more than $500 million a year. And I think BCG took it one step further and said there were only 1,000 that made more than $100 million a year. And so I'm thinking, if you're a $1 billion fund and you think about the types of deals you're looking to do as a buyout fund, you're targeting large deals. And there really aren't that many large deals. In fact, I was at lunch one day in Nairobi, and the father and son who own the business were talking to the head of a major private equity fund, and they were asking questions about, why do I need your capital? Like, we've been running this business for a few generations. We live a comfortable life, and we're able to do the things that we want to do. We're able to start new businesses if we think it's strategic to do that. So why do we need your capital, and why do we need someone else telling us what to do? And so I just saw the challenge that private equity firms would have in finding deals that were attractive to them. And there was this wide open space building, earlier stage companies that could grow to become market leaders in these countries. And also, a lot of these sectors were wide open. You either had the dominant product in a category in the consumer space was something that was imported from another market when it could easily be made in the country where it was being consumed. And the chocolate cocoa is a perfect example of this. These countries were producing lots of raw materials that were simply being exported without adding much value. So you take the cocoa industry, chocolate industry is over $100 billion industry. Close to 65% of the cocoa, the raw material, comes from 2 countries in Africa, yet those countries only realize, depending on the estimate, somewhere between 2 to 5% of the value in this $100 billion plus industry.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is crazy. Why are we not doing more value-added processing so we can capture more of that value here versus exporting a raw material? So all those things contributed to me deciding to invest at an early stage and build businesses that, if they scaled, would really capture significant market share in the countries where they were operating, regions where they were operating. A great example, we invested in a tomato paste company in Nigeria. Little known fact, Nigeria is one of the world's largest growers of tomatoes, but they're one of the world's largest importers of tomato paste.
Wow.
And so you let that sit. Like, why is a country that's growing tomatoes importing tomato paste? Well, there's a number of issues that occur throughout the value chain. First and foremost, whereas the average farmer globally grows about 40 tons a hectare, and the average farmer in the U.S. grows about 150 tons a hectare, the average farmer in Nigeria grows 5 tons a hectare. So if you're a processor and you're trying to coordinate with farmers to buy tomatoes from them, you can go to 20, 30 farmers in the U.S. and say, I'll buy everything you grow. Here's what I want you to grow. Here's when I want you to plant it. It's much easier to coordinate with those farmers. In Nigeria, you have to multiply that by like thousands.
Wow.
You need 20 to 30,000 farmers to coordinate with you to be able to get to the similar volume that a processor in the U.S. would be able to get to. So that's a logistical issue. And the problems with yield it's not rocket science. It's use better inputs, better seeds, fertilizer, use better farming practices, plant at the right time, irrigate, simple things. And so this company we invested in was able to help farmers increase their yield. Some of those farmers are now growing, up to 70, 80 tons a hectare. They're never going to get to the U.S. type scale from a yield standpoint, but they've easily exceeded the global average and make processing much more competitive locally because you can coordinate more easily with those farmers.
Yeah.
So that's just an example of some of the challenges and obstacles that needed to be overcome.
Yeah. I'm curious about this concept of leapfrog development. I've only really heard it that I can remember, by the way, like one pretty good example in cellular specific, which I think that's a pretty famous example, right? Like the idea that like for infrastructure, a lot of Africa or many, it's going to go, cellular first, right? They're not going to have to dig and do all the things we did in the past. That's really the only example that comes to my mind or that really resonates, but you're there real time, you're studying it, this is where you invest. Any examples come to mind of what leapfrog development can actually look like from the ground, what you're seeing?
Yeah, so you mentioned the phone one. That's a great example.
That's the one that I know. It's the only one I know, so I'm not great. I'm working with limited tools here, Euler, but thank you. Go ahead. Help me, pull me up.
So financial services. So, here in the U.S., you probably grew up needing to go to a bank to make a deposit money into your account. You have physical credit cards or cash that you use to pay for things with at stores. Many people in Africa never had bank accounts. And there's an argument that they may never have a formal bank account. I think, banks have gone completely digital. People are paying each other through digital payments. And so in fact, now you're probably used to paying for stuff with Apple Pay or Google Pay or whatever other cell phone-based payment methods you use, Venmo or whatnot. But the original one was in Kenya. It's called M-Pesa, and it's still being used today. And that technology is spread across Africa and the rest of the world that people are very comfortable. In fact, payment via mobile devices is native to most people. That was the way they learned how to pay. They never had credit cards. They probably never will have credit cards. They didn't utilize banks the same way that people in the U.S. utilize banks. So that's one perfect example of leapfrogging. Another example is in the energy space. Here we talk about this energy transition and the need to transition away from fossil fuels to more renewable devices, or generation capabilities. So I think now in the U.S., it's probably somewhere around 25-30% of the power is generated from renewable sources. In many countries in East Africa, that number is higher than 70%. In some, it's as high as 90%. And they're getting their power from geothermal, from hydro, from solar, from wind. It's a whole mix of different renewable sources that they're using. And so, people say, Africa is going to suffer as climate changes, even though they're not the ones that cause the problem. And nowhere is that more true than in the energy space. Many of these countries are already fully utilizing renewable sources to generate energy. One that I'm super excited about as well, and it's still materializing, but it's the role that AI is going to have, particularly in healthcare and in education. On the healthcare side, when you look at a per capita basis, how many doctors there are in the U.S., they compare it to how many doctors there are in any given African country, it's going to pale in comparison. African countries just don't have enough doctors. They don't have enough nurses. But with AI tools, as they become more effective at diagnosing and recommending treatment options for people, you will see solutions where someone can simply cough into a phone and be told what sort of respiratory illness they have, or take a picture of something and get a diagnosis immediately and a course of treatment. And that's something that's going to not only improve the quality of care, it'll improve access, it'll improve affordability, and it's going to be transformative. Same thing on the education front. People are going to get individualized lessons in the most remote areas to help them learn faster and better. And so I think AI is going to be transformative for both of those and for other industries. So those are hopefully a few additional examples of leapfrogging that you can now understand a little bit better.
I love it. I think about that one often, actually, that people in rural areas will get more education. Like, I'm always like, man, can you imagine? Now, obviously, with more education, also more social media, more of the other stuff, of course. But I always fantasize about the thought of, like, colonial United States, when all we had were these candles and we didn't have social media and all this. Like, we were just smarter, like in certain things. I mean, like books and reading and literature, like certain things that, fabrics, I believe, of like civilization and what makes it interesting to be human. I'm like, we were just smarter. So in those rural areas, there's geniuses, there's pioneers, there's people that are going to be reached, that are going to create the new world that we're going to live in, or that generations in the future are going to live in. So to me, that's where I'm like, wow, to unlock potential. That's why I'm super excited about Africa, what's happening now, and also what's going to happen next. So, Euler, it's been absolutely a pleasure having you on the line today and getting to know more about what you're doing over at Vested World. That being said, if somebody's listening or watching this, and if they want to continue the dialogue and to learn more, how do they connect with you and your team?
I think the easiest way is LinkedIn. I'm trying to be more active there and writing some of my thoughts and what I'm seeing. So that's one. I'm not on many other social media channels. So otherwise, it's in person. If you're somewhere in Africa or in Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, and want to connect with our team, definitely shoot us a message. You are at vestedworld.com, and hopefully we can connect in person.
Amazing. And for everybody listening, just so you know, we'll definitely put some links in the show notes, so you can just click on the links and head right on over and connect with Euler and his team. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. You heard me correct. Each and every day we're bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way in your journey as well. And we don't want you to miss a thing. So hit that subscribe or follow. And Euler, thanks again for coming on the show.
A lot, Adam. Really appreciate it.